In our last episode, we dove into the first two crucial steps of effective communication, which are really hard, right? Getting calm and self-confronting. We explored why it's so important to regulate our emotions before starting any conversation, and how challenging our own stories helps us take ownership of our role in this dynamic. If you missed that episode, I recommend going back, listening to that one first, as it lays an amazing foundation for all the things that we're about to discuss today.
Yeah. And today we're going to build on those steps and really get into the heart of communication, which is how to speak from the wise, grounded, and best version of yourself rather than that adaptive child.
The 3-year-old.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is where we take all the internal work that you've done from the work we talked about last week, those first 2 steps, and we're going to learn how to express it in a way that creates collaboration with your partner. And that's key. We're really talking about collaboration today.
Yeah. And that's hard, especially when we're getting into this. But if you're ready to learn how to communicate with clarity, kindness, and even courage, even in the hardest conversations, stay with us. That's what's next on Master Your Marriage. All right, today we're going to take on one of our audience's questions, and we're going to show you exactly how we would apply this 8-step communication model to this listener's specific challenge. We're going to bounce ideas back and forth with each other, and we're going to see what we can come up with.
Should be fun.
Yeah. And I right from the get-go, we already know that I'll probably take the regressive mind, the 3-year-old position, because I'm really good at that. Charlotte's going to take the higher step.
So as we model this back and forth, you'll get to see 2 different options for what kind of a conversation you don't want to have.
Yeah, I'll probably be what not to do.
And what to do.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So like Robert said, we are taking a specific question from our listeners. And for privacy, we're going to eliminate, of course, names. We're going to eliminate identifying features. And I'm going to paraphrase this question just a little bit.
Change it up a little bit.
Change it up a little bit. But it's really something that I think is super relatable. It's a very common issue that it really could be applied to so many different people.
You want me to read it?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. So here's a question from our listener, and it's a guy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
All right. So I don't know how to talk to my wife about my concerns without her feeling like it's a demand or that I'm trying to control her. So a little backstory. We've been married for 20 years. And for the first 18 years of our marriage, I was harsh, immature at times. When I didn't get my needs met and expectations met, I was sort of a bully and I was childish. I spent the last 2 years, I've been doing some therapy, and I've recognized my part in this. I also see a path forward for us that's beautiful, and I'm determined to be a better husband and father. We're much better domestic partners and parents than we were. Things are much better. Our conversations are much calmer, but there's very little depth. We lack connection. We lack intimate communication. We lack affection and admiration. There's been no commitment to creating a better relationship that cherishes each other. Even though neither of us really want to leave it, it doesn't feel like she wants to be married to me. When I've asked for clarity or commitment, or suggested that we do therapy or coaching, she rejects and usually stops talking entirely for a day or 2. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, and I don't know how to communicate this in a way that's honest without putting demands on her. This is a tough one.
This is tough.
Yeah.
Okay. It's challenging because it sounds like she has a valid reason.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you lay it out that way, like it's not been great for 18 years and it's only been 2 that you've been trying to change yourself, right?
Right. So clearly there's a lack of trust. She may not believe that he has improved. And for all we know, maybe he has, maybe he hasn't.
Right. Without a doubt. Right.
So we don't know the whole story here.
Yeah. Who knows?
But it also sounds like, assuming what he is saying is true, that if we were to apply those quadrants that we talked about in an earlier series, remember the relationship grid, it sounds like he may have been in quadrant 1 because he was a bully, critical, demanding, kind of one up. Yeah. And it sounds like he may have just, in order to make the peace or keep the peace, maybe shifted, slid down into more of a position 2 or 1 down position where now he's, instead of overtly controlling, now he's placating and appeasing, accommodating. And he mentioned walking on eggshells, right?
Yeah. And maybe there's still some controlling, right? That's happening in
more covertly.
Yeah. More covertly. Mm-hmm. And that's a tough one. I mean, think about it. When your partner switches their position, you're just like,
yeah, I don't recognize you anymore.
I don't recognize you. And I'm not sure what to do with this new person. Like I had a really good handle on how to manage
The one-up guy.
The one-up guy. And now this other one, I don't necessarily know how. And so
And
therein lies the challenge, right?
And she may not respect that placating, appeasing, accommodating version of him too. Yeah. So
there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. And it's been 2 years though, where he has admitted to going to therapy and he's been working on himself. And it seems like neither of them are really allowing themselves to be knowable to each other.
Yeah. He mentioned that not intimate or vulnerable.
They can't have those vulnerable conversations. So they're both still kind of hiding.
So I guess the question is, if he can't share his needs or even make requests, then there's going to be resentment's going to build up. That's just going to happen, right? And if he can't figure out how to communicate truthfully, he'll eventually become so resentful that he'll either just completely move over to the other side, which is going to be walled off. Mm-hmm. Right. Or he'll just leave. Right. So what does he do in this situation? What do you think?
Right. So
I guess we should go through the steps.
I think we should go through the steps. Okay. I think we should now we've laid out the problem, which I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to. It's not an easy one. When we did this, when we've done similar podcasts before, people were like, that was too easy of an example. You should give us a hard example.
Well, here you go.
Here's a hard one for you.
Buckle up, because this one's rough.
So we're going to go through the steps, and Robert and I are a little less scripted today. We're going to just bat this back and forth to see if the steps would work for a really difficult challenge.
Yeah. And we're going to try and take on what's inside their head, given the information that we have.
Yeah, and we'll make up a little bit.
Yeah, and hopefully provide some answers. So it's likely not exactly the way that our listener even put it, but we're going to do our best.
And you can apply the same exact steps to whatever your exact scenario is.
Yeah, that's the point, right?
That's the point.
Okay.
All right. So what's step one?
Step one. So step one is really just stay calm. Never try to work through the process when you're mad or when you're in an aggressive mind, like when you switch back to your 3-year-old, right? We all have this adaptive child, and we all have this wise adult. And the adaptive child is that 3-year-old. And remember the hallmark features of this 3-year-old is there's no we, it's only me. They're not interested in the relationship. They're only interested in what's best for them.
Exactly.
Right? So you have to get away from the adaptive child and, ask your wise adult to step forward, which means you have to remain calm.
You have to get calm. You have to stay calm.
Yeah.
And as you're going through these 8 steps, remember that if any point in the 8 steps you find yourself reverting back to me consciousness rather than we consciousness, it's time to remove yourself, start over, and come back to step 1.
I was wondering, and I'm just going to ask a question, and it's going to be off script because, hey, that's what we're doing today. So my question would be, if any time during this conversation I start thinking about what is best for me, is that an indicator that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Right. The minute I'm more interested in getting my own selfish desires to rule and to get the other person to yield to me, or if I can't see a collaboration or I can't see a win-win here that's good for you, good for me, good for the relationship, then I'm probably in my adaptive self.
Or the minute I stop looking for a collaboration.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Okay. Step 2.
So step 2 is to self-confront. And the whole setup was last week's episode.
Yes.
And we talked about all of these questions in detail, but now Robert and I are going to go through them again, but we're going to apply this specific question from our listener. And the important thing to remember about these questions is that you're going to, when you actually start speaking, you're going to refer back to your answers that you came up with.
Yes.
As you are having the real conversation. It's kind of like you're having the conversation first internally before you actually go do it, which is excellent practice, by the way.
Right.
Practice it first mentally.
Yeah. And so this whole pick one iteration of the problem. So if we were going to pick one iteration, it's not, for the past 18 years, you've never listened to me.
This is super important, because if we come to the other person that we want to have this conversation with and we bring in 27 examples of all the ways that you've shut me down, that you've walled yourself off.
And that one time.
What's going to happen?
Other time.
They're going to get defensive, right?
Absolutely.
If we pile on. So let's look at one particular iteration.
Right.
So, and also do this like a video camera would do this. So you want to just separate the facts from your interpretations, from your diagnoses, from your stories, all of that.
Yeah.
So
every time you say that, separate the facts, I slip into some show my mom used to watch, and it was like detective show. And I'm dating myself because I remember my mom watching it. I don't remember what it was, but he would always say he was a detective or something. And so he'd say, the people would start talking and he'd say, just the facts, ma'am. So
Just the facts.
Every time you tell me that, I'm like, just the facts,
ma'am.
Yeah.
Just the facts.
Just the facts. That's all I want.
So let's say I don't actually have this information. So we're just going to make this up.
We're going to have to make it up. Right.
So let's say in this listener's life that he had recently gone to her and maybe covertly put a little bit of pressure on her to make a commitment to the relationship. Like, hey, honey, here is this expert that is doing this TED talk on relationships. And I really want to listen to this together. Would you listen to this with me? And I mean, that's not too bad, right? But let's say in response to that, she got really quiet, gave him the silent treatment, said okay, but then never did.
Right.
We'll just use that as a for instance. Okay.
Okay. So it was an invitation.
Yes. So there he would, now I'm just going to say in this case, he's analyzing that one event. This is what I said. This is what she said. This is what I saw happen next. This is what I thought.
Okay. So the image is an invitation to work on the relationship through watching some sort of a video together. Okay. Easy enough. Yeah.
All right. So then the next step would be if those were the facts, then what comes next?
Well, then we got to dig into like what stories am I telling myself about the facts, right? Like what meaning have I applied?
Humans are great at making meaning.
Yeah, what meaning have I applied based on her, in this instance, either not showing up, not wanting to, saying no, any of those things. And now I'm going to have a story for each of those things.
Correct.
Right? She doesn't show up. Now I can work into my regressive mind, which I'm good at. Like she doesn't care enough. Right.
Right.
Yeah, so any of the 3-year-old things.
So if we're going to separate the facts, which we just did, we made the list of this is what I saw, this is what I heard, this is what happened.
Yeah.
Now, what are the stories I've told myself? This is part B of that. Now we're going to, what's my regressive mind actually saying to me? So give me some examples of what the regressive mind story might be to apply to this series of facts.
Right. And so again, so she didn't show up, and I'm great at regressive mind. But I always say it's the knee-jerk reaction. Like it's the first thing that comes to your head, right? Like, oh, well, she doesn't want to work on the relationship, or she doesn't want to be married to me. She's never going to choose me. She got something else that, anything else is more important than being with me. So like all of these things, some of them are, I'm the victim. We're telling all of these different stories, but it's like that, right?
Yeah. And I love that you said the gut, what'd you call it?
Gut, just sort of a knee-jerk reaction.
So Terry Real calls this the first consciousness.
Yeah.
And I love that because I don't feel like we necessarily have to be responsible for our first consciousness. I think that thoughts aren't necessarily even our own. A lot of times those are things other people have said to us.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't need to hold myself responsible for that.
Or feel terrible about it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do get to choose a second consciousness.
Yeah, without a doubt. Right.
So in these cases that these examples, which were great, she doesn't want to be married to me. Maybe she's got something else going on. Then I would give myself a chance to have that second consciousness.
Right.
So what I would ask would be something like, is this really the most fair and honest story about these facts?
Yeah.
That's the second consciousness.
Yeah, without a doubt.
We have to challenge that regressive mind.
Yeah, you have to say it's that second consciousness, or even take the second chance to just say to yourself, like, okay, what really could be happening here? And that's what you're good at, or that's the part you're demonstrating today.
So
right?
The first question that I love in this book, this comes from the book, The Crucial Conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this helps us to stop painting the other person as the perpetrator and ourselves as the victim. And I love this question, which is, what am I pretending not to know about my role in this problem?
Yeah, I love that.
So maybe as I look at that situation, maybe I go, so maybe I was being a little bit covertly controlling. I was even kind of fooling myself. But when I went and found this TED Talk, and what was the energy in which I actually came at her with that video that I wanted her to watch?
Or is it, if I ask myself this question, continuing on that thought, is this something that would definitely support my position over her position?
More than hers.
Right.
Good point.
Am I asking her to watch a video that is just a video that is saying the same thing I've been saying?
Mm-hmm.
So look, honey, the experts agree
with me.
I'm right.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I love that. Like, what am I pretending not to know about the situation? That self-reflection is terrible. Or is there a blind spot here? Am I only looking for videos
that support me?
That support me, books, videos, stories, right? That support my my position without actually stepping out of my current position and looking at how she might see that.
Correct. Yeah, I love that. So then that leads us into this next piece, which is the next question we can continue to dig as we're doing step 2, which is self-confronting, which would be, what might her reason actually be for feeling the way that she does? So we want to assume, as you said last week, positive intent.
Always assume positive intent.
And assume that if she's a reasonable, rational, and decent person, why would a reasonable, rational, decent person do this, think this, behave this way?
Right.
So, it doesn't mean we're always reasonable. I think we all go into our adaptive child sometimes and we aren't always reasonable. But if we assume that she is, could we at least allow ourselves to be curious about what her reason might be?
One of the examples is maybe she's protecting herself from being hurt again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or one of the first things that came to me was maybe she's still really hurt.
Maybe she's still really hurt. Maybe she doesn't feel as though she's had an adequate apology for what's happened.
Right. Well, I mean, I could just say paint a different picture of this, and let's just assume that her life has always had this dream of having a happy marriage full of harmony,
mm-hmm.
and yet her dream has been dashed over the past 18 years, and she's just struggling through.
Yeah. And
you're asking her to scrape the dirt off the dream that she's buried.
Yeah.
And open an old wound. And that's a very valid concern. And if you ask yourself that question in that way, you'd be like, yeah, well, I don't think I'd want to open that wound up either. It might be just too soon. Maybe there's a better way or a different way to do that.
And maybe there's still some unresolved, unprocessed stuff that they haven't really worked through or talked about, and that she hasn't felt safe in bringing up at this point. You know, if she is a reasonable person, why might she feel this way? And you and I are obviously doing a lot of mind reading here.
Yeah.
We're just guessing.
We're just guessing.
But that's what we want you to do. We want you to try to get into their shoes and see what might a reasonable person think to have arrived at this position.
Right. Absolutely.
And then you want to also, as we're challenging and self-confronting and challenging these stories we've created, is kind of ask ourselves, well, what might be something I can do right now? What's a small step that I can help to move this, rather than being in that powerless, victim, helpless story that I'm stuck in? What is something that I could move towards a healthier relationship?
And I love the way you put that there, because you're sort of bringing in the crucial conversations again, right? So we're challenging the victim story.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We're challenging the villain story, right? She's a villain. I'm a victim.
Yep.
And now we're challenging, that I'm powerless.
So what's one thing that he might be able to do? Well, what do you think? Maybe there's still more he needs to apologize for, or maybe his apologies have come across as not being sincere.
Yeah. There's lots of different ways to apologize, and sometimes it's verbal, and often it's nonverbal.
It's your behavior.
Yeah. And maybe she is waiting for more nonverbal.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to step 3. So step 1 and 2, we did cover last week, but we just played them out in real life.
Yep.
So step 3 is to consider what you want. So you're about to enter into a conversation with her. Consider what you want to achieve.
Right.
And as you consider that, also think about what requests you're going to make of her, and also what you're going to own to her. Right. So again, this is where as Robert said earlier, we all have within us a regressive child, and we have a wise, mature adult. We can flip into our limbic system really easy with this question, or we can stay in our wise prefrontal cortex with this question. So what is it we want to achieve? And you're going to have to really push your higher mind to come up with something. And here's what I would suggest as we do this step is that if at point in this that your desire is based in control,
right,
rather than collaboration, we've gotten off track.
Right. The minute you start seeing I instead of we,
we're off track, and we need to go back to step 1.
Yeah. Which is so hard. You're like, what? I got to go back. Okay.
So we need to figure out how do we because like we said last week, we're communicating more than our words.
Yeah.
And they're going to sense incongruency. And if we're communicating something with our words, but in our energy, we're communicating control, it's going to come across as incongruent, and they're going to pick up on that. They're going to map that. They're going to feel that. So what might the regressive, when I say, what is it you want here? What are your what are your desires
So
what would the regressive mind say?
So regressive, right? And you mentioned limbic system. I just wanted to clear that up. When we talk about limbic system, that's lizard brain. That's just base needs, 3-year-old kind of a thing. So it again is that first thing. It's like, well, so the regressive mind might say in we're in step 3, this is a request, right? Or what you want out of it, right? So this is my request. I just want you to fix yourself and commit to making this marriage work, right? Yeah. And you can see where that goes wrong to begin with, because it starts with I.
And I need you to do this, and it's very controlling.
Yeah. I needed you to fix yourself. There's nothing about me here.
Right.
And, so that we can make this marriage work. And then the subtext behind that is so that I can be happy.
So that's where the regressive mind, again, as Robert said earlier, you'll know the difference between your higher order thinking because it's going to be more collaborative.
Yeah.
That wasn't very collaborative.
Nope.
Right. Okay. So what might the higher order thinking say? So a higher order thinking is going to think about it in terms of a win-win. It's going to think about what's best for the relationship. If we look at the relationship or the marriage as a project, as a system, what's best for that system. So yes, I want to be chosen. I do want to feel chosen. I do want to feel desired by you. I want to feel like we're in a marriage. But I also realize, because now my higher order thinking is kicking in, I also don't want to have to accomplish that in a way that feels like I'm pressuring you. I don't want to do that anymore. That just feels icky. And I don't want you to feel like you have to, just give me what I want and, manage my needs and placate to me. Otherwise, I'm going to be a bully. I want to respect your autonomy. I want us to work together. I want us to collaborate. I want us to figure out how to make our relationship stronger. So now I'm more in my wise mind.
Right.
So, let's work together. Let's figure out a way that creates an epic relationship where our children have something to model.
I love that. I love just the whole idea of like, instead of like, I want you to fix yourself. It's like, how can we come together? How can we build this relationship? How can we be better parents and partners to the children? Like, exactly. And that's a we and a team and a collaborative model.
Yep. And I think you could even throw in there, like, I want us to really know each other fully, completely, and be knowable to each other. And right. I want to know how to love you well and right. what that's going to take and what your needs are to be able to do that.
And that's going to be hard. But we're going to talk about listening next episode.
Yeah. So the key is when you are choosing what you want to express as your desires and your requests, that they are aligned with your higher mind.
Right.
If you don't, the tone is going to be completely off. If you're in your higher mind, it's going to sound very much about we and collaboration instead of me.
Yeah. And I. You.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the desire really should be something that's going to force you guys to collaborate more.
Yeah. Okay. Step 4.
Step 4.
All right. So step 4, request a dialogue, which means you go to your partner and you invite your partner to have a conversation with you. For example, you might say, look, I know this is a tough topic for us, especially given my history, but I want more for us and I want us to be stronger together. Is now a good time to talk? Is now a good time to address this? Is now a good time to maybe have a conversation? So like just any way that you want to put it that way.
Why is this step so important? Because most people miss this step.
Yeah, I think it's because they just assume that I just assume that you know what's going on in my head and you can tell that I'm bothered and you've been waiting for me to tell you.
I've just been sitting here waiting for you to bring it up.
You've been sitting, just waiting nonstop for me to do that. And because it's been on my mind, I think sometimes because we're working through these steps and we think about it, it's like, it's this thing and I just have to get it off my chest. And of course, now's a great time. Mm-hmm. But, the minute you start thinking now is a great time for me, we start taking the other person's autonomy and then that's controlling. So when you're eliminating someone else's autonomy and you might have to, so then if you say no, so is now a good time to address this?
You're know supposed
what?
To say I'm actually didn't get a lot of sleep last night and I'm already on the edge. I think this would probably not be the best time to talk about it.
Okay. And I want to respect that. And I want to do this when we're both feeling at our best. So when would be a good time you think to address this?
Perfect. Yeah. How about you let me get some good night's sleep tonight and then can we table this until tomorrow?
You bet. I'd love to take it up again tomorrow.
Okay.
Which is better than I don't want to talk to you until 2026.
Yeah. And that's important. We can't just delay because we don't want to have a conversation. We're trying to avoid something,
Right.
but do make sure we are asking, as the speaker, we are asking the listener to step into a very difficult role.
Oh yeah.
Of being a listener, because as a listener, it's a much harder job than being a speaker.
All day long.
Much, much harder.
Because you haven't been thinking about all the problems.
And you haven't gone through this whole process that we just did. We just spent, all this time getting calm, self-confronting, preparing ourselves. But what opportunity has the other person had?
None.
And they have the harder job. They have to attune, be present, be able to just kind of put their own opinions aside for a minute to try to really understand yours.
Be patient, sit in a room with you when they don't necessarily like you.
And
that's hard.
I had a client just this last week that, called me up and she's like, we were applying the steps and something went wrong. And I shrank immediately. I ran behind my imaginary wall. I shut down. I couldn't talk. And I said, okay, let's go through the steps. Let's see what happened and what was missing. And she said, oh, we missed this step.
Yeah.
We missed this step.
Super important, right? But think about how much differently it can go if I say, is now a good time? And you're like, yeah.
Now's a good time.
Now's a good time. I'm not looking forward to it, but it's a good time.
Or give me a second and then I can breathe a little, get myself calm. Okay, I'm ready. Let's go.
Yeah.
So step four is, again, step four, what we just covered, which is inviting your partner to have a dialogue with you.
So crucial. Okay. So crucial.
Okay. Step 5 is
just the facts, ma'am.
Just the facts, ma'am. So now you're actually at the point where you're ready to speak. Oh. You've gone through calming down, self-confronting, challenge your story. You know what you want. You've invited the person into a dialogue. Now you can finally open your mouth. And again, are we going to describe one incident or are we going to pile on?
I mean, we're going to start gentle. We're going to start soft, right? Because you can't come in hot.
No,
we're going to avoid you statements and why statements and always and never, because nothing is ever always and it's never as well, right?
And we know that based on the research that how you start this conversation will determine how this conversation goes.
Yeah.
And Gottman actually found that it not only predicts where this conversation goes, it predicts the future of the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming in hot
isn't going to work.
Yeah, it just catches everything on fire.
So you're going to then the very first thing you're going to say to them is actually the very first thing you did with yourself when you were confronting. You're going to describe the video camera. Now, I gave you this video that I thought would be good to watch. And I noticed that you got really quiet. I don't think you replied. And then when you left the room, we didn't really have another conversation until the next day.
Yeah.
You're just doing the video camera of what without any interpretations.
Absolutely.
You're going to present that video camera version, what I saw, what I heard, what I observed, etc.
Yeah, just the facts without adding your twist.
Not yet. Not yet.
We're getting there.
We're getting there. And again, here's key. When you are communicating wisely, you are self-revealing. This is the most important thing. Mature conversation is always self-revealing. It's not diagnosing. It's not talking about you, not blaming, not accusatory. It's completely self-revealing. Yeah. So that's why the I saw, I heard. And what if they jump in at this point, the listener jumps in at this point, says, I have a little different version of events.
Yeah. And that's fair, right? I might be right. I might be wrong, but my honest recollection or how I remember or the way that I saw these things
is this
is X.
And that's
and without raising the temperature, you're just going to say that. It's like, no, valid point. And I think this is the point where you want to validate. You're like, no, actually, I think you might be valid in how you remember it and how you see the situation. Just, I can only tell you how I feel and what I saw and felt in that instant.
And this is my honest recollection.
And it may or may not be accurate, right? And we're going to get to the point where we can have that conversation.
And I love that because this makes it, again, more collaborative. It's admitting that maybe perhaps I didn't see it all. My 126 bits that I got from this conversation might be different than your 126 bits from this conversation. And I'm admitting I could not have all the facts correct, but I'm here to collaborate with you and figure out what happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Step 6. Remember, this is an 8-step process. So we're getting almost to the end.
We're getting there.
Step 6 is to share your revised interpretation or the meaning that you've come to or the interpretation that you've come to. And this is the one that you worked through when you were self-confronting.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to come in with your regressive mind interpretations, stories.
You don't want to be with me, all those things, right?
So actually, let's go back to that. What was that? The regressive mind earlier said what?
oh, you hate me. You don't want to be married to me. You don't want to be in this relationship. You're done trying, like any of those things.
So instead, because we've challenged this earlier before we ever opened our mouth, we're going to say,
like, is this really
the best
likely?
interpretation?
Yeah.
So now at this step, you're going to offer your interpretation, but it's your more developed interpretation, the one that came from your higher mind, not your lesser mind. So maybe that is something like, I've thought about this a lot and I've considered this, and the interpretation that I honestly have arrived at is that you're probably still afraid and that you're protecting yourself.
Yeah.
Because you see that as the only way to avoid getting hurt again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that feels a lot different than you don't love me, you hate me.
And it's hard, right? That's hard to sort of, I don't want to say hard to argue with, but it's hard to push back against that.
And how does the listener feel when hearing that? Like,
you've just sort of validated them, and you might not have hit everything that they feel.
Right.
But, as a listener, I'm like, oh, well, in this instance, it sort of looks like maybe he considered how I might be feeling.
Correct.
Which is not how most conversations go.
Yep.
Right. And that's why this is so crucial, because if you guys can master these steps and get really good at them, then all of your difficult conversations can be just that much easier, where you're giving each other grace, where you're thinking and counting on the other person to understand and worry about your feelings and those things.
And collaborate.
Yeah. And collaborate. Like, how can we come best to
And
this?
if we had skipped step 2, what would have happened here?
Would have
been a disaster.
Yeah.
If we hadn't started with that self-confrontation, we would have got to this step and never have said, like, my honest interpretation is that you're protecting because you don't want to get hurt again. And that's reasonable. Right.
And to even admit that, and that's reasonable. I understand that.
Step 7 is all about, what is it you want? What is the picture you want to paint of what is possible? What is the desire, your higher desire? Again, not your regressive desire. Yeah. What's your higher desire? And so we need to kind of go back to that step 2. And again, don't offer the regressive mind desire, which was, what was it? I just want you to go to therapy and fix yourself.
Yeah. But think about how awesome this is if we get to the point where we're presenting our higher desires, right? Mm-hmm. So you've already switched from regressive to the higher desire when it comes to still hurt, and maybe you still have some feelings, and I need to respect that. So already you're taking the temperature down,
softened, right?
And then you just say things like, instead of you need to fix yourself, it's like, we have this mutual concern, this mutual desire to come together as a couple, and you state that, and like I understand that maybe you're still hurt, and I own my part in that. Mm-hmm. Right. I really just want to find a way forward for us to work together as a couple.
Feels completely different.
And create an amazing marriage and a beautiful home for our children. I'm like,
so let's do this step. Let's slow this step down just a little bit and talk about, how do we really present our higher desires? What's the best way to do this? There's 3 pieces to this that I think are so important. Okay. When we're presenting our higher desire, or what we are requesting, number 1, you should cast a vision. And that vision should be what makes the relationship, the project, stronger. Not what's best for me, not what's best for you, but what's best for us and this project.
Right.
Number 2, you should be very clear when you're making this request about what you're going to do, what your part is it that you're going to do to achieve it.
I love that.
And then you're going to also make a request from the other person.
Yeah.
So it's like, here's the vision. Here's what I'm willing to do to achieve it. Here's what I would appreciate if you would consider doing.
Yeah.
Now it's collaborative. It's you, it's me, it's us. And this is that we are the vision of what I think would be great for our system, our project.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very different. So let me give you an example. Listen to it again and listen to see if those 3 things were present. So did I cast a vision?
Yeah.
Did I own my part in that vision? And did I make a request of you?
Did I make a request of you?
Okay.
Where you could collaborate on that vision.
Where we can collaborate together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want our marriage to thrive, right? I don't want it to just survive. I want us to have, this is the vision. Yep. I want us to have the kind of relationship where we admire and respect one another, where there's compassion, where there's kindness. And I want us to get to a place where we really cherish each other. And I just see a way for us to be able to change those generational patterns that we started with, the things that we inherited from our parents. And rather than pass those things along to our children, I see where we can change that future. And I want something, where our children have this amazing model where they tell their kids about their parents and what an amazing relationship that they have. And I know that I have absolutely contributed to the mess that is here.
Yep.
I own my part, a huge, huge, massive part in that, where I've been a bully and I have been immature. And I am 100% committed to change. I am 100% committed to being compassionate and calm and self-regulating. And I would really appreciate it if, number three, if you would be willing to be totally honest with me in what it's going to take to get there.
I love that.
To tell me what you need from me in order to feel safe. Even if it's hard for you, even if it's hard for me to hear it, and it probably will be, I think it still would bring us closer together and connect us.
Look at that.
All three things. Did I get all three of them?
You got all three. Look at that. I mean, the first one was way better than the one that I cast.
Well,
but also way longer.
Way long.
Yeah,
and we could
longer, not long.
It was a little long.
Yeah.
But
I liked it.
But did it have a vision? Yes. Did it have my part in it? Yes.
Did
it make a request?
Yes. Yeah. And not even a hard request. Well, I mean, maybe it requires the speaker to be a little bit vulnerable and then respond with a request of their own.
Yep. And then step 8. Step 8 is going to be giving them now an opportunity to respond to what you've just said.
Right.
So we're going to talk about that next week and how the listener would respond. But let's just kind of talk about what we just did and why this is so different. So this process that we've just laid out, these 8 steps, it's way more mature.
Yeah.
It encompasses everything that our wise mind, our prefrontal cortex came up with in that beginning part of the process.
It puts the 3-year-old in daycare.
It does.
Yeah.
Was it self-revealing or was it accusatory?
Right.
It was self-revealing.
Was it collaborative?
It was collaborative.
Yeah.
Was it calm?
Did I get to challenge the stories? Right?
Yes.
Villain, victim, powerless,
right.
Helpless, right?
Very different than what most conversations sound like.
Right. And can I cast a vision? Can I say what I want and what I need instead of just what I don't want? I don't want to fight anymore. Well, that's not really an answer.
No.
Right.
Right.
You have to come up with something positive as you move forward. And it opens the door to collaboration. I mean, that last statement, like, just tell me what you need in order to feel safe so that we can communicate, become more intimate, more vulnerable, and build things together. Like,
that opens the door.
And it opens the door, and it opens the door for a larger conversation. And your partner in this instance, for this example, maybe she doesn't necessarily have an answer. Maybe she needs to spend some time thinking about what she needs. And we're going to talk about listener's role and response on
and
our
that's
next
okay.
one.
That's okay.
That's fine.
And even we get to this point, if the listener's like, I need some time to be able to think before I respond, that's totally okay. Well, they might need time to go calm down.
And think about what you've spent time working through the steps. The only thing they've done is remained calm and worked as a listener, but they haven't had a chance to really process the information. So in my mind, it's perfectly fine for the listener to say, like, okay, that's a lot. And I think as the person bringing up the concern, you have to then also give grace for the listener to prepare
for their response
as much as you've prepared coming up to
100%.
This, right? You can't just say, well, I laid my heart out open. Now you have to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like throwing flowers at you and say, marry me right now. And we met an hour ago. Like,
and if you had that energy, then it wasn't really collaborative to begin with.
Doubt.
It was, again, and that will be felt as controlling. So a truly collaborative conversation means you're willing to hear a no or a not right now, or let's talk about this tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think that's key. Willing to hear a no, willing to hear a not right now, or let's talk about that tomorrow.
Yeah.
But if I did it right and I worked through the steps, and then you said, I need to talk about it tomorrow, I'm like, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I understand. Like,
because you're in a place of.
Because I feel like now we're on a path. Like, that's a path. Let's talk about this whenever that is, tomorrow, next week, later, right? Now is developed the collaborative path because your partner just said, that means the two of you, right? Instead of, well, I need to think about this and then I'll respond. I mean, that's.
What was it you said last week? You said, really ultimately, like, am I able to hold in my mind that this is someone I love?
Right.
This is someone I care about.
Someone that I want the best for.
And can we come up with something together?
Yeah.
And I think if you're really holding that thought in your mind, then this is going to go well.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it.
All right. Well, that wraps up this episode. Those were the 8 steps to collaboratively speaking and preparing yourself all the way from preparing yourself to speak all the way through inviting and giving the opportunity, the floor to the other person to be able to speak. And next week, we're going to go and move on from there.
Yeah. Well, I hope you guys are enjoying these many little mini series that we keep putting together.
Yeah.
And as always, if you find that this episode has helped you, or that maybe this episode or the series of episodes would be beneficial, we'd love it if you just share it with your friends and your family members, anybody that they might be able to, do that with. And also we'd love it if you take the opportunity to leave a review. A 5-star review helps really drive the algorithm for us. And it can get our message out to more people.
Remember to be kind to each other this week. Put each other first. Remember, it's the small things done often that make the biggest impact.